Good afternoon, everybody. So I hope you enjoyed our session of musical chairs up here. We are a little higher now, and hopefully you can see us a little bit better. I'm Steve Hall. I'm the Director of Enterprise Mobility for Xamarin. I work with a lot of our large enterprise customers to figure out how Xamarin fits in their mobile strategy, which includes certainly integration to back-end systems, authentication, networking, and of course security. And with me today is a panel of deep experts in security from Arxan, Airwatch, Good, IBM, and MobileIron. The people here represent numerous years of experience in the security industry, their thought leadership, and their companies, which are all leaders in the mobile security space. And they're here to all shed some light and just help you understand a little bit more about some of the risks and concerns in security in mobile. So thank you all for coming today. Anar, I'm going to start with you. If you could just give us an introduction of who you are, who you work for, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure, thanks, Steve. So hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Anar Taori. I'm Senior Director of Product Management at MaaS 360 by IBM. And MaaS 360, for those of you who are not aware, is an enterprise mobility management platform. So we manage mobile devices, applications, and content on those devices and secure them. This is deployed. It can be deployed as a cloud service or also installed on-prem. And I'm driving the product strategy for this product line. One of the things that I'm working on as well, and which I'm looking forward to interacting with you on, is I'm building an ecosystem of mobile app developers who are using our app security into their apps and building and providing that enterprise-grade security into the app so that we can then take those apps and provide it to our enterprise customers. So looking forward to working with you on that.
Thanks. My name is John Britton. I work for Good Technology. Good's here because we believe in Xamarin. We believe what it brings to the enterprise. If you don't know Good, come down to our booth. I could spend an hour talking about it, and I don't want to get that involved here. I've been at Good 4.5 years. I specialize in security and privacy. So I think it's one of the things that's most overlooked when you're talking about deploying mobile applications or mobile devices within the enterprise. And hopefully I'll be able to share some things with you that you didn't know today.
Hi, my name's Sean Ginevan. I work for MobileIron. I've been at the company for just about 5 years now and have definitely excited to be here. We also believe in Xamarin. And I think probably more importantly, our customers believe in Xamarin, and we're starting to see a lot more enterprise apps being developed on the platform. For what we do is help IT basically roll out the endpoints that your devices run on, distribute the applications, make sure the endpoints are secured. And for developers, we have tool sets that also allow you to go and tie that security and management layer that normally is on the device into your individual applications. So thank you for having me.
Is this mic on? Okay, so my name is Vince Arneja. I'm with Arxan Technologies, probably the only company up here you're not familiar with by name. We focus on application level security. So when you think about things like obfuscation of code or checksumming of code or trying to do secure storage on any kind of application, whether it be B2E or B2C, we're primarily utilizing that kind of a use case. We're probably not too familiar with the folks here because we're just starting the Xamarin relationship. But we're seeing a lot of interest from Xamarin developers that want to further secure applications, whether it be B2E, B2C, and so that's why we're here with our story.
Hi, my name is Erich Stuntebeck. I work for Airwatch by VMware. I've been with the company for about 4.5 years and watched us grow from about 80 people to over 1,800 and then get acquired by VMware as the EMM space has grown. So we hit all the major acronyms within EMM. We do device management, application management, and content management. And at Airwatch, I'm the director of research where I lead a team that's focused on product-related, security product-related enhancements.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. And just so you know, these people are available or other representatives from their company available at the conference here. At the expo level. So if you have any questions about their products, about the services they offer, be sure and flag them down and ask your questions. So before we jump into security topics themselves, let's first talk about what many of us are here for, which is the success and the value of mobility itself, and what unique value mobile brings to enterprise and consumers. So Anar, I know we talked earlier. You have a success story that comes to mind in terms of what value mobile brings to your customers.
Sure. So as mobile becomes the primary computing platform, what I'm seeing happen is companies are starting to mobilize their core business processes in the mobile apps. And these mobile apps are adding a lot of value in helping companies create a sustainable competitive advantage, or at least a competitive advantage. To give you an example, one of our customers, Caesars, which most of you are familiar with if you've gone to Las Vegas and gambled at one of the casinos, they're a major holding company for more than 50 casinos and brands. They were able to create a competitive advantage by reducing the time it takes for a customer on the casino floor to get a drink from 22 minutes down to 3 minutes. And this is just amazing. And the way they did this is really by creating a mobile app. The app is called iBeverage, and they rolled this out on all these iPads, and they gave it to the waitresses. So the waitresses would take these iPads, go to the floor, have the customer order the drink, and when they're ordering this drink, the data is transmitted automatically to the bar then has the drink ready, and when the waitresses go back there, the drink is ready for them to pick up and bring back. Versus the old way, which was that they would take this order, walk to the bar, order something, come back, then wait 10, 15 minutes to make sure that it's ready, and then go back and get it. And so you can see how mobile is really helping.
That has to be one of the most beautiful use cases there is right there. Anybody else want to just add a quick success story of a customer?
So we've got a few customers that are relatively unique, maybe not that compelling because of the alcohol, but so we've got some customers that are using us to protect smart locks, right? So if you think about a smart lock, kind of like the Nest model, but for a lock for a door, there's a mobile app that drives that whole process, right? There's a whole mobile app for iOS and Android. And so those kinds of companies are starting to use our technology to secure that, but that's a pretty cool use case that's just emerging in the smart home type of model. Wonderful.
Thank you. So, it's use cases like these that drive the success of mobility, that have provided with users great, compelling reasons to use their mobile devices in unique circumstances. The sheer number of devices, the application and users, because of that success, mobile is now more and more at risk from people taking advantage of either gaps in the operating system, gaps in the devices, gaps in the development, or in the infrastructure that's supporting those applications itself. So as we dive in here a little bit more into security, let's first talk about security in general. 2014 is being described by many security analysts as the year of the data breach. According to the Identity Theft Resource Center, there have been over 575 data breaches so far in 2014, which is nearly 30% increase over last year. And this really spans across all industry sectors, whether it be public sector, retail, healthcare, financial, you name it, it's affected every industry. And the results of some of these data breaches are just staggering. The IRS, nearly 1.5 million records exposed and stolen. Recently, Home Depot, 56 million customer records out in the open. And one of the latest breaches that's been identified by the Identity Theft Resource Center is JP Morgan Chase, with over 76 million of their customer records exposed. And even if no accounts are accessed and no data or theft actually occurs from from these data breaches, the expense of investigating and mitigating these risks, it's enormous. And so is its potential for a public relations nightmare. So breaches such as these have really raised security consciousness at a new level in the enterprise. If you're involved in enterprise development of applications or infrastructure around applications, you will probably know that security is high on people's mind as to how they're going to protect their data, protect their customers, and certainly the business itself. And the onus is on the enterprise to work toward a comprehensive security strategy that protects this sensitive information while still providing the benefits because that's of mobility, because that's one of the things they don't want to do is impact all of the benefits and value you get out of your mobile applications. So, Sean, in a financial industry study by MobileIron, 50% of those enterprises that you surveyed did not have a mobile strategy. How can organizations assess their security needs for their mobile strategy?
Yeah, I think what was interesting about that particular survey is not only did half of the enterprises not have a mobile strategy, and this is Fiserv, which you would hope has their act together, JP Morgan Chase possibly being the exception to the rule. But you know, also that a lot of these organizations have been very reactive for those that do have a strategy. So 46 or 45% actually said that their mobile strategy wasn't actually aligned with the broader IT objectives within the organization. And over 35% said that the mobile strategy wasn't aligned to the needs of the business. So when actually looking at saying, you know, what is my mobile strategy, quote unquote, it really is important to be figuring out what am I trying to achieve. You know, we're not all here as developers to build apps for apps' sake. We're doing it because there's some reason that the business wanted us to do it. Is that going to be end user satisfaction? Hey, I'm going to go and make users happier because they can find a conference room more easily. Is it going to be productivity? We've worked with a large healthcare organization, Kindred Healthcare, and they've taken all the paper-based processes of taking people into a healthcare environment, and they've digitized it, not only making it easier for that patient to go and get in through the door, but also making the data more accurate because it's going directly into an EMR system. Or am I going to go and try and leverage a brand new customer experience? So we've seen lots of cases where retailers are deploying smartphones and tablets to transform the way I interact into a retail store. So it's not just, hey, I really like that pair of shoes. Do you have them in a size 11? Sorry, we only have a 12. And, you know, I go to Zappos. They can go and fulfill directly, you know, through e-commerce right there in the store as part of that transaction. So once you start to figure out those goals, and that ends up being a project-by-project basis, you have to start thinking about what's the risk tolerance for those projects. The way I go and do security for the Conference Room Finder app is going to be fundamentally different than the way I think about security when I'm dealing with patient records or when I'm dealing with credit card transactions. And so once you start to figure out that risk tolerance, and a lot of people have sort of, conventional wisdom says BYOD is the norm and IT kind of rolls over and plays dead. That's not the case at all. It actually ends up being much more conversational between the developers, the IT administrators, the security folks, and actually the line of business, so that way you can actually be building the best apps, the best experiences, but also making sure that the right infrastructure is in place to keep data secure.
Thank you. So following on that question, just with respect to, you know, how do they assess their security needs, Eric, when enterprises look at their mobile strategy, who needs to be involved in there? Is it just developers? Is it just the security department? Who's involved in defining the security strategy for mobility?
I think Sean already kind of touched on this, which is that, you know, security is really everyone's job. So you need support from the top, where you've got to have an appropriate strategy communicated and then get an appropriate solution on your mobile device to secure them. But then it's not just that, you know, the job at the top. It's everyone's job. It's the employee's job to understand the policy and to be smart about what they're doing with their mobile devices, even if it's not necessarily restricted by the software solution that's in place. And of course, it's the developer's job to create secure software. So security isn't something you just add to your software at the end. It really needs to be part of the complete development lifecycle. So security is really everyone's job, and it's not confined to one particular role, I think.
So to be clear on that, it's not just technology, security. We have policies, process, other things, anything else that's involved in just creating that security strategy?
Exactly. It's really a combination, I think, of the technology, the policies, the processes, and you have to get it all right.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Anar, what do we know about the number of apps being created or deployed in the enterprise? Are they still largely focused on desktop users, or are we seeing now, have we crossed the line? Are we seeing really the trend go to a mobile-first enterprise and more apps being developed for mobile than traditional desktop environments?
Yeah, so a while ago, right, if you go back to maybe 2010 or before, most of the apps in the enterprise were all Windows. 100% of the apps were Windows. That crossover happened, the rise of non-Windows apps to Windows, that ratio, the crossover happened in about 2012, is when less than 50% of the apps in the enterprise were still Windows. Today, we are about 30 to 35% of the apps in the enterprise are Windows apps. And mobile apps, on the other hand, have just taken off. So when you go back to 2011, when I was talking to customers and asking, okay, how many mobile apps are you building? And this is enterprise customers. They were saying, oh, we plan to build maybe 2 to 5 apps this year. And now it's more like 25 to 100 apps. We even have some customers that are building 500 apps. So mobile apps for the enterprise, and enterprises embracing mobile apps is really taking off. And therefore, security is even more important in this world and now.
Thank you. So I have a question for John here around enterprises shifting to BYOD. But before I ask the question, I'd like to just get a show of hands here. How many of you work for a company where you have a bring your own device strategy? How many bring their own devices and the enterprise does not supply your device, in other words? So we've got easily half of you that supply your own devices. So John, we're not seeing a lot of enterprises supply people with BlackBerries anymore. They've largely shifted from providing devices to a BYOD strategy. But what unintended consequences has this had for enterprises and its employees?
Well, I think Anar just hit on it. I mean, if 65% of the applications now in the enterprise are mobile, think about all the applications out there. Or let me back up. Who out here is old enough to remember working with WordPerfect 5.1? Yeah, we're all in that stage. When you showed up at work that first day, you got your desktop, you got WordPerfect, you got Lotus 123, you got a suite of applications. 10 years ago when you showed up, maybe you got a laptop. You were one of the new friendly employees that was able to work remotely. But you still got an office suite, and you still got a communication suite. And enterprise told you what to use. Now with mobility, it's the wild, wild west. If I need to go do document sharing through a cloud-based service, how many different applications do I have available to me? Does IT even know half of them are out there? Have they vetted even more than 3? Same thing with Office suite productivity applications. Same thing with email. Same thing with everything. It's the wild, wild west where enterprise just doesn't have the means, the resources to get their hands around all the different applications that are out there. So security, again, comes into play on what the enterprise is using with BYOD.
Great, thank you. How about things just in terms of how they handle phone bills?
Well, so anybody from California? Yeah, did you guys see the court ruling that the courts put out saying that even if you're BYOD, the company owes you part of your bill now? So you're going to start seeing this trend where I'm assuming that most of us up here are going to start offering something that's going to help the enterprise do split billing, both on the voice side and the data side. You're going to start seeing a little more interplay. I think about a year ago I was up on stage and I had somebody say, we are going to always subsidize the billing. And I looked at him and I said, well, do you remember getting those AOL discs in the mail? Everybody got them, 100 free hours, 200 free hours, 300 free hours. And I remember working in IT 20 years ago going, hey, you need to pay my 1995 Prodigy phone bill so I can connect into the server room and do what I want to do at 3 in the morning. That ticket's gone. No one's paying for it. Actually, I should ask, is anybody having their company pay for their home broadband? Yeah, see, a couple. And I had made the assumption that, and probably without the court's help, there wasn't going to be a subsidy of phone bills or data or whatnot. It was going to be the ticket to dance. You want to come work for Good or Airwatch or MobileIron or MaaS, you're going to pay for your own phone bill on your private personal line. again, so it's starting to flip a little bit, and we're starting to see a little bit more interplay between the enterprise and the individual on that.
I think on the BYOD side of things, though, we tend to get hung up on as an industry about cost. BYOD lets me not have to pay for the phone. BYOD lets me not have to pay for the phone bill. And sure, like I'm sure, you know, some advantage there. Although, interestingly enough, we see from a lot of our global customers, it actually saves them money to just pay for the personal minutes, because if you're a Global 2000 organization, your negotiating power to go after Vodafone and say, give me a big pool of minutes, or go to AT&T and do the same thing, is a lot higher than my ability to go to AT&T and ask for cheap roaming minutes. So it depends on the business that you're running, and are you having a lot of users travel internationally? Are you having users who are very data intensive? Am I using new applications like machine to machine? That's going to drive the cost structure. Where BYOD becomes really fascinating, and I think it's really from a Xamarin perspective most important, is choice. What that means is, as an end user, I can bring the device that I am most comfortable with to the table. You know, as a technologist, I might be more comfortable with Android because I like the ability to customize it. As a media person, you know, or as a more layman user, I might like iOS because it's slick and it's well integrated. So what that means from an enterprise's perspective is they actually, as they're mobilizing all these apps, need to be thinking about more than just one platform, more than just Windows in the desktop PC era, more than just BlackBerry in the mobile era, in the previous mobile era. They're having to build a usually 2+1. And I think, you know, the conventional wisdom is that 2+1 is iOS, it's Android, and it's Windows, both phone and tablet. And so that's where I think that, you know, that user choice ends up making users more productive. It makes them happier. If there's a cost benefit, sure, that's a benefit too. But the user satisfaction is much more important.
Thank you. Just want to add, the problem with all the choices you have, though, is it is a consumer-driven world. And if you start taking away why you bought the new iPhone 6 or the Samsung Galaxy S5 or 5S or whatever, and you as an enterprise start taking away those sexy, cool features that the user's doing, the inverse is true there. So you have to be cognizant. Again, I mentioned earlier, I believe in as much about privacy, and that's individual employee privacy, as I do about corporate security too. So that balance needs to take place when you're considering BYOD.
Thanks. And just for the record, if we do get to split billing, you know, kind of company billing versus personal use, 99% of my billing is email, and 1% is streaming NFL and Netflix. So just want to get that on the record. Vince, Arxan published a report last year stating 56 of the top 100 paid apps for iOS have been hacked. Those are apps in the App Store. Right. And 100%, all of the apps of the top 100 paid apps for Android have been hacked. First of all, what does hacked mean in this context? And what does that say about the state of app security?
Yeah, so basically what it says about the state of app security, and I think mobile security in general, is this is the first inning. This thing's just getting started. I mean, the web security of 2004 is really where we are with mobile security today. And so that particular study, third-party study, was based upon apps that are in the app stores that have been reverse engineered, tampered, manipulated in some way to insert malware or whatnot, and then republished or repackaged in secondary app stores. And so we see that all the time with our customers because they're putting these applications, investing many dollars, building hundreds of applications. The B2E apps, and this goes back to Sean's point about risk tolerance, risk classification, there are certain types of applications you don't have to worry about security per se. They're informational by nature. Transactional applications that have a higher level of risk, or risk classification specifically, those applications need different forms of security. Gartner just put out a study I think a couple weeks ago, that they're projecting even next year, 75% of the mobile apps will be inherently insecure. That's next year. And these apps aren't even doing things like static code analysis. Things that we've grown up to do on web apps, they're not even taking place on mobile because of the push to get these apps out. Whether they be a B2E app for productivity or a B2C app because they're trying to compete against a competing bank or whatever the case might be. And so it's very early in the stage, but these kinds of numbers just speak to the nascency of the exact space we're in.
Thank you. Sean, in traditional waterfall development, testing and security are typically slotted at the end of the project. We've all seen this. You spend 6 months developing something, you have 3 days to test and deploy. With more, let's say, modern development processes and methodologies, testing's made great strides to be included more or less day one and integral to the development lifecycle. Where does security typically fall in the project lifecycle, and where should it?
Well, there's two questions there. There's where does it and where should it? Where does it, I still think we see a lot of folks will go in and they'll do audits after the fact. I think particularly as a technology industry, we move toward agile, we do continuous development, having automated testing is critical. And I think when you start to think about security, there's three ways to look at it. There's security from the development perspective, there's security from the validation perspective, and there's security for the operational perspective. On the development perspective, it's incumbent on developers to write good code. And I mean, you asked, we talked at lunch kind of about some of the ugly stories. Veracode is one of our partners, did a survey, and they found that over 80% of apps that they've tested, both iOS and Android, have security vulnerabilities due to code quality, like bad error handling. I mean, this is sort of like things you learned in comp sci to do right aren't being done right. IONS, which is the security research consultancy, published an app. Their marketing department published the app that the research side then got a hold of, and they found security vulnerabilities in their own app for their security conference. That's kind of embarrassing. And it's, again, it's basics. It's like, hey, I stored passwords in clear text. Hey, there's, remote SQL, I have a little SQL server on there, and there's cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. So developing and then testing and validating with each release becomes critical. And then it also becomes critical to be looking at the endpoints that are going to run these applications and making sure that as you build apps securely, you're using both the OS feature sets and third-party feature sets for containerization security, that those mechanisms aren't being tampered with, that the user's not coming back and going, I know it's going to be awesome. I want to go and do something with my device that I'm not usually able to. I'll jailbreak it and get, now the ability to get third-party apps which may or may not be properly secured. And so that ends up basically being a continuous cycle that starts with development, ends with IT, but is actually constantly being run.
Great. And Eric, we have, as we talked about a little bit earlier, devices that are enterprise-owned, supplied by the enterprise. In that case, I kind of look at those devices, and I know that's not my personal device. It feels like a company-owned device. I understand that everything on there is maybe inspectable or auditable by my company. But we also have personal devices that can be managed by the enterprise. So in a BYOD strategy, I may bring my own iPhone or Android device, but my enterprise really forces me, if you will, to install a client, some kind of client so the enterprise can manage the device, which possibly means I give up some of my rights. Do I give up all my privacy rights in the event of having an enterprise-managed client on my personal device?
I don't think you do, and I don't think you should have to. And in fact, there are a number of countries that actually have fairly strong regulation about what data can be collected off of personally owned devices, particularly in Europe. So some of our customers, they cannot collect complete lists of applications that are installed on the device. They can't track the device during certain off hours. So I think there is the end goal is always security, whether it's enterprise owned or whether it's personally owned. I think you just maybe go about that in a little bit different way. So maybe with an enterprise device, you can do full device management. And even when you're doing full device management, you're going to be subject to some of these laws that restrict what data you can gather from the device. But if it's personally managed, you want to keep the enterprise content maybe within a container and then keep that separate from the personal content to preserve the privacy on that, but also to preserve the security of the enterprise data.
And just to add to that, I mean, I think that there's one of the things we've seen, and there have been studies to show this from us and others, is that there's a real gap between what IT is actually able to do on someone's device regardless of ownership, and what users think that IT is going to be able to do if they bring their own device to work. Or for that matter, run personal applications on a corporately owned device, which, let's be honest, everyone does. So, you know, and I think, Eric, you brought up the idea of training kind of in one of the earlier answers. The communication between SecOps and the guys who are actually running the apps is critical. And being able to have that social contract to say, here's what we're going to do, here's why we're doing it, and here's your responsibility as the end user is absolutely critical. And you know, I think the good news is that there are lots and lots of tool sets available, both kind of on the application security side for containerization, but the operating systems are getting a lot better as well, right? So Apple, remote access to data. So is anybody here building apps that are going behind the firewall? Handful of people. So those applications, it used to be in the Windows world, I made that device an endpoint on the network. I used full-blown VPN. That gets a little bit tricky in the mobile world, and the good news is that there are a lot, you know, with Apple, and I think this is starting to come out with Windows and with Android as well. You can actually be tunneling just those applications behind the firewall rather than making the device an endpoint on the network. So this concept of privacy is becoming much more pervasive even at the operating system level.
And just to add to everything that everybody said, I think organizations, enterprises are starting to realize that maybe tracking all the applications that are on the device not necessarily benefit to them, or tracking geolocation data. A real world story here, a customer with Good called me up one day and said, we need help. And I said, sure. So I went and installed, sat in the server room with them, did the POC and all that fun stuff. And one by one, they kept saying, does your product do geo-tracking? Does your product do geo-tracking? And I kept saying, no, no, no. Finally, it was just me and one guy left in the server room. And I said, what's the deal, Bob? Come on, tell me, why is this important? Well, about a month ago, we had a sales guy sitting at a bar at 2 in the afternoon. Hopefully he wasn't ordering drinks every 3 minutes, but he probably was. And this was not a MaaS 360 customer. The guy got in an accident, and he hurt the person that he ran into really badly. Well, if you're a good defense attorney, you find out, or excuse me, a plaintiff's attorney, you find out everybody you can sue to make as much money for you and your client as possible. So what did they do? They called up this, they found out where he worked, they found out this company was doing geo-tracking. They sued him, the drunk driver that hit the client, plus his company, and the argument on the company was, you knew or should have known that he was at a bar on a Friday at 2 in the afternoon instead of doing his job. When the lawyers saw this, they called up IT and ComSec and said, turn it off today. So the enterprises are starting to get smart and savvy. So I think that the privacy is starting to come back over towards the middle a little bit at a lot of enterprises, and you're starting to, of course, education is important, and of course that trust between ComSec, IT, and your end user is very important, but I think it's starting to swing over where the company's saying, yeah, I don't care what apps you have on the device. Make sure that the apps are treating me nicely, and I don't care where the device is during the day, and as long as you're productive, I don't care. So.
Well, and I think the lesson learned there is that if you're going to drink on the company's time, you go to Caesars. And if you get caught, you're functional testing the application for the Caesars group there.
Turning off GPS.
Yeah, and turn off your GPS, right, exactly. So Anar, on both corporate-owned devices and personal devices, people download apps from the App Store. But we know that many apps can be hacked. Certainly there are alternative app stores. How as an enterprise can I prevent risky apps from being loaded on employee devices?
Yeah, you absolutely can with what's available, the tools available in the market today. So we had an example, a customer who had their, we were working with the customer to determine how the risk analysis, doing some risk analysis and determining the riskiness of the apps that were being used. And what we found is that their employees were using a very top 10 gaming application. And this app was actually collecting data from their contacts in their phones and then writing SMS messages. And they had no idea about this. So by looking at doing a risk analysis of application, which could be a code analysis, it could be static or dynamic, you could actually look at the riskiness of an application and make sure that you understand what permissions is the application actually using and how is it behaving before you distribute it to your users.
Wonderful, thank you.
I just have one point to add on that. So I think most of us up here, our companies offer a solution that can scan applications. But one thing I always like to throw out there is, as a developer, how do you make sure that your application, even if it is a legitimate app, doesn't get flagged as something that might be insecure in the application? And one of the things I see all the time, especially with Android applications, is requesting excessive permissions. So make sure you understand exactly what permissions your app needs and then request only those. So if you don't need the ability to send SMSs, make sure you're not requesting that. If you don't need the ability to track the call logs, don't request that, because that's going to throw up red flags in a lot of the scanning software.
And if anybody knows of a flashlight app for the Android that only asks for the one permission to turn on the flashlight, let me know. I guarantee you, go search for them, and the top 5 all ask for 5 or 6 permissions, and it's silly, but that's the way it is.
So is that developer laziness? I'm just going to check every permission because I don't have to figure out whether or not this works, or is it because I'm going to go access other data on the device and phone home?
I don't know, but it scares me. I can't find that flashlight app that just turns on the flashlight. So
the short answer is it depends, right? And I think that the IT sometimes has the other tendency, which is to say, oh my gosh, I don't want the CEO's phone number being SMSed by some game, so I'm going to go and block every app that accesses contacts. There are legitimate apps that use contacts, like LinkedIn. So, I think certainly developers need to know what the permissions are, but IT also needs to be better educated about it as well. Facebook runs into this problem constantly, where they're sort of seen as the obsessively requesting permissions app, and they're actually having to now publicly go, we use the phone dialer because we have messaging stuff built into the app, or we use contacts or these other things. So, Android is sort of the almost a little too public in terms of what, and too broad with the permissions it grants. So there's some OS changes that could help there too.
Wonderful. Vince, the Open Web Application Security Project, which I had to look up because it's primarily known as OWASP, many of you may be familiar with that, maintains a list of the top 10 mobile risks. These include things like insecure data storage, insufficient transport layer protection, and lack of binary protection. Can you explain to us what lack of binary protection is?
Sure. So for those that don't know, OWASP is a sort of open standard top 10 list that's been around for web apps for 10 years. Everybody here probably was working on web apps before they moved over to mobile. So they've recently come out with a mobile top 10. A lot of the items on there are effectively carryover from the web world, but clearly there are some mobile-specific items that are also in that top 10. One of those that Steve just mentioned is actually the need to protect the app itself, right? So if you think about the different use cases that are being described here for these different apps, not every app can convey trust in the platform or the container. You got to actually put trust in the application itself, and that's really what that top 10 item speaks to, is putting trust in the application itself. So protecting the app inherently, so the app itself is self-defending, because especially with B2C apps, you have no other control other than the application. You have no control on that consumer device. You have no control on that OS. You can't put out a container. You can't do anything else. So your only measure of control, per se, which is what security is all about here, is to actually put more controls, defensive mechanisms in the application itself.
Wonderful, thanks. I just got the 10-minute warning here, so we are in the lightning round of panel questions here. So, John, tell us about jailbreaking. What is it exactly, and why would somebody want to jailbreak their phone?
And I have 10 minutes. All right. Do I really need to tell you guys what jailbreaking is? Do I really need to tell you why you want to jailbreak? So I'll answer a different question. As an enterprise manager of mobility, do you want jailbroken devices in your network? And I get this question asked to me a lot, and my answer is it really depends. What is the, again, I went back to, these are shiny, funny, sexy devices that the employees bringing into the enterprise to do their work. You know, Sean hit it on the head when he said, it allows the individual user to be productive in the style and the format that they want to. So if I've got reason to have Jailbroken and I can validate that to the enterprise, maybe my device should be allowed to be on the network. But the threshold for me as an IT person, as a security person, to allow a jailbroken device or a rooted device on the network is rather high. Now, maybe you have a ComSec group that's actually going out and investigating alternative stores or Cydia or other things, and you want to try and stay as fresh and up to date of things as possible. That's okay. Just as a broad perspective, though, personally, I've got jailbroken devices. Do they hit the good network? No, because I'm not allowed to, and I haven't been able to convince security that I'm okay.
And Eric, as a follow-up, and just expanding on John's answer there, as an enterprise, should I be concerned about jailbroken devices on my network?
Absolutely. I think you should be very concerned about jailbroken devices, because the thing is that if it's jailbroken, you've got root access, and once you have root access, then the user can grant that to any application on the device, and you don't know what it's doing. So it was, I think at Black Hat last year, Black Hat 2013, there was a talk by, I believe it was LaCoon Mobile Security, where they showed how they were able to hack into some of the top mobile email containers.
So I need to correct you right there, and I need to stop, because the LaCoon piece was a farce. They never actually connect or hacked into the container piece. So I just want to correct and set the audience straight. I was there both in Brazil, in the US, and Amsterdam. LaCoon has been put on notice that their talk, their approach, what they represented was a misstatement of everything that they did. Now, I'll let you continue on jailbreaking being dangerous, but what LaCoon said up there in front of thousands of people, and it's been published, is false.
Well, maybe hack is not quite the right word. And I think what they showed, which is that essentially you have to decrypt content in order to show it on the screen at some point, that's not anybody's fault. That's just the way these things work.
Right, and they were, and what LaCoon was doing was actually they were going to the UI view piece and showing the content that was human readable. So at some point, as Eric's saying, I've got to decrypt my message and I've got to make it so John or Eric or Sean or anybody can read that as a human. And what LaCoon was actually doing is they weren't actually breaking into the container and showing that information there. They were actually going to the UI view on a jailbroken device to grab that data and scrape that data.
Right, so let me clarify. So I don't think, it was not a hole in any of the mobile containers that they were showing. It was just something about how these systems work, which is that when you want to display content to a user, it has to be decrypted and shown on screen.
And these systems would be any mobile device?
Any mobile device,
right.
any computer, essentially. That's just how this works. So not a hole in a mobile container. But what it does show is that jailbreaking is dangerous, because only when you jailbreak the device can you get the root level access to look into the memory of other processes and start looking at this information that you think is protected. And so I think that's why you should be concerned about jailbroken or rooted devices.
So Vince, I'm going to err on the side of caution here, and say as a developer, I don't want my app to run on a jailbroken device. If jailbroken, then exit? What do I do?
Yeah, so I mean, jailbreak is one of the techniques that we provide, and you have to detect jailbreak. I mean, to me, especially if we're talking B2C type application, B2E applications, you have to have that level of visibility on the back end. Because jailbreak, as Eric is saying, regardless of the example, it's a door opener. It's giving root permission, and things like Cydia substrate and the ability to swizzle into applications that are iOS or hook into applications, those things aren't happening unless your device is jailbroken. So as an absolute policy, and we work with customers all the time on this topic, you have to have visibility on jailbreak and root. What you decide to do with it after that point is up to you and your business process. You could permit it, you could watch it, you could do a lot of different things, but you can't be ignorant to the fact that you're running on a jailbroken or rooted device.
Thanks. We're going to open it up to Q&A here, so if you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand. I had one question right at the beginning of the session. I'm just going to pitch to Sean here, which was about certificates, which is one of the methods available for basically signing in and authenticating to backend systems. Can you just give us a quick overview of certificates?
And I only have 10 minutes. No. So you know, I think we've talked a lot about securing data at rest. We've talked a lot about making sure that we don't have privilege escalation when we're not supposed to, and everyone here, I think, on stage does jailbreak detection as well as other factors to make sure the endpoint's secure. What we haven't talked about is the fact that mobile devices are hyper-connected, and they want to connect to the fastest network available, regardless of what it is, and regardless of whether or not the network's secure. And so certificates are basically a mechanism to identify the user to a back-end server. And it provides a couple of different benefits. One, you can just use them to establish the device identity to some sort of application gateway, and we have one as part of our platform. And that allows you to ensure session trust. So even if I have a user who jumps on what he thinks is the Starbucks Wi-Fi network that is actually a Pineapple AP sending all my data to China or Russia or whatever the evil country is this week, I can go through and block that traffic at the gateway because the app basically won't be able to negotiate a session until there's no break in the SSL tunnel. There's also a benefit around transparent authentication. So we see a lot of customers running into problems around password rotation. Anyone here work for an enterprise with a 10-character password or more? Wow. Okay. Most of the large enterprises I've talked to have 8, 10, sometimes 12-character complex passcodes, and they rotate them every 30 days. Now, anybody who's tried to do that on a smartphone with 15 apps, not awesome. So we see a lot of customers using Windows Domain Authentication and Kerberos for existing backend services, or sometimes SAML and OAuth for next-gen federated services in combo with certs to make sure I can actually authenticate that user without having to type in the password. It also provides me an easy way to revoke access without having to terminate the user account. But that's the hour-long conversation on IAM. We're not going to have that here.
Thanks so much. Question?
Long one. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts on SSL pinning.
Oh, SSL pinning, I think, was the question. Certificate pinning?
So SSL pinning is a mechanism basically to ensure session trust, particularly for web sessions. I don't have a perspective other than to say I've been hearing more and more about it as a potential way to protect a lot of those web sessions. I haven't seen a lot of implementations of it to go, yes, it's the answer.
I think it is becoming more and more important, especially as it becomes easy for users to unknowingly add root trust certs to their trust store, and then all bets are off at that point if you've got a malicious root trust cert there. So I think cert pinning is important where you can do it.
Has anybody here used certificate pinning in their Xamarin applications? Okay, yes, because it absolutely can be done. You can do certificate pinning in Xamarin applications to establish that trust and make sure that you are hitting a known server. And yes, I see you, Daniel. I know exactly who in this room has done this. Next question.
Yeah, hi. My name is Harsha. I'm from Cognizant. My question really is about how do you propose to give a business case to business teams in the customer organizations about security? Because I'll give a little context to that question. Most of the global enterprises, even the IT teams don't have control on what kind of apps being built. Some local team, Argentina or a Singapore team will come and say, there is a nice, cool marketing app I want, and they build it. Most of the organizations don't have an inventory of what kind of apps are being built. But when you look into the security landscape, you need to think of the industry regulations, be it PCI DSS or HIPAA, and then OWASP guidelines, and then enterprise guidelines. I don't think IT teams have, and most of the times what we see is that the mobile architecture, mobile security has not been plugged into enterprise architecture and enterprise security. So how do you propose to navigate this complex landscape, yet convince the business that you need to put money into this?
So can somebody address that? But maybe the issue here is you've got a large organization, global organization. You have a lot of people developing apps inside that organization who may not all communicate. So can somebody address just the governance issue maybe?
Yeah, so I think I heard a couple of things in the question. And from my experience, when you have the enterprise that has that mobile strategy all laid out, it makes that world of difference. So another customer that I've been working with, they've defined their mobile strategy, and they've told their mobile developers and their developers and their accountants or whoever wants to write an application, if you follow this mobile strategy guideline that we've set up, we'll publish your app. The #1 app at this company is what's on the menu. So it actually takes about 10 minutes to walk from one side of the building to the cafeteria. So this is a really important app. They need to know if it's macaroni and cheese versus, I don't know, steak and whatever for lunch. So, but it was actually somebody in the accounting department that built this application because he was tired of making this 20-minute round trip for no food. And all he had to do was go down to the IT department's SharePoint site, download or read the mobile strategy paradigm that they'd set up, and he was able to just go to IT and say, here's my app. They went and did a cursory review to make sure that he followed their mobile strategy, and it was published out to the entire community. As a matter of fact, that's the #1 app that's been deployed at this enterprise. So again, I think if your enterprise has the right mobile strategy, and you've got the right people making those strategic decisions, building those apps, publishing those apps, and deploying those apps becomes rather easy.
Yeah, this is on the CISO and the CIO's radar. I mean, what's interesting is that in the same survey where we were looking at 50% of enterprises don't have a mobile strategy and are being reactive, when you ask the same, kind of re-ask the question, you go, what's really important for mobile to be successful? A strong security posture was like second to last. #1 was agility. So they know, like, security is table stakes. They know they need to be, you know, they can't afford the data breach. They also know they need to keep up with the business because the challenge is, you know, there's all this kind of conflicting data right now where you're saying enterprises don't have a mobile strategy. Frost & Sullivan says the vast majority of enterprises have deployed their first mobile app. 6% of enterprises have built more than 50 or deployed more than 50. And so what that suggests to me is shadow IT, where the line of business is wagging the tail of the IT dog, and CIOs are right now trying to get in front of that and put those procedures in place.
All right. Yeah, if we have time for just one more, great.
What about tools for covering jailbreaks like Xcon? Is there a way to ever win this battle, or will you always be left behind?
So tools that jailbreak the phone?
Tools that cover the jailbroken phone. So I can jailbreak and install Xcon, and it can circumvent most jailbreak detection systems, so that I can access the enterprise network with a jailbroken device. Nobody knows.
Yeah, so it's always going to be a cat and mouse game in my mind. And if you're using a third-party tool and you're building an enterprise application, when that third-party tool updates itself, then you've got to roll that in. So you're always going to be behind in this game. I had another brilliant thought, but I completely lost it. So if anybody else,
so security is reactive, certainly in this case, where new hacks or methods come out in order to compromise apps or give you certain capabilities. But it's also proactive.
Right, and I remember the other piece. So thank you for filling in for me. If you're using a third-party tool like a Sexton, and I'm not going to pick on them, but once it's been broken, once the XCon guys, if they're still active, I don't follow them anymore. Once that tool's been exposed to the community and it's introduced into these XCon type tools or like tools, then it's broken for all of the applications that use this tool. So it is a challenge. You need to start obfuscating code. You need to start coming up with inventive ways. I think all of us here on the panel have had some experience with XCon in our products or affecting our products to some extent. I think we're a little bit smarter today, and I can guarantee not one of us is going to go on record on how we're approaching jailbreak detection.
Wonderful.
Heuristics are awesome.
I want to thank, first of all of you here. Thanks for joining us today for this panel. And a special thanks to all the members of our panel. If anybody has more questions, we'll hang around for a little bit. Please come up, introduce yourselves, find out more about the products their companies represent, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.